They said the land belonged to men who could seed it, same as they said a woman's worth was counted in children. Mara Caldwell heard it young and lived it hard. By 28, she'd known 3 miscarriages and one husband who spat her out like gristle once the last doctor said the word final. Final like a nail in pine wood. It was spring when Warren Caldwell dragged her suitcase out the door and left it sitting on the porch like trash not worth burying. His new wife was already showing, some seamstress girl from Waco with milk-thick thighs and a belly ready to swell. They said it was God's will. Mara said nothing at all. The wind across the Caldwell property never did slow. It whispered through grass with a kind of cruelty, the kind that made even healthy cattle miscarry in the dry months. Mara stood barefoot on the porch and watched her place in the world shrink behind her, acre by acre, until the road turned and the dust swallowed it. She walked for 2 days. Through pasture, then scrubland, then down to the old cattle trail along Dry Creek where the hawks circled low and the fences sagged. She might have died there and been glad for it, if not for the sound of a hammer echoing through the canyon like gunfire. Someone was fixing a broken gate, and Mara, driven by thirst or pride or some last ember of wanting to live, followed the sound. That's where she found him. He stood shirtless at the edge of a sun-cracked fence, hammering rusted nails back into place like the land owed him obedience. He had a boy beside him, maybe 11, holding a wire spool and squinting into the glare. The man didn't speak when he saw her, just looked up, then down, then back up again like he was measuring weight against want. She must have looked half dead. Mara stopped just short of the gate, her voice cracked dry. "I ain't got nowhere." The man nodded, as if that was all the story he needed. He offered her water and nothing else, not even his name. She drank like it hurt, then folded herself to the ground beside a burned-out tree stump and passed out. She woke in a warm barn stall with a horse nearby, breathing steady like thunder in sleep. The boy was sitting outside the stall door with a shotgun across his knees. "I told Pa you ain't dangerous," he said without turning. Mara tried to sit up. Pain lanced through her ribs. "You shouldn't believe everything you think." He shrugged. "Didn't, just said you looked more sad than mean." Mara slept again. In the days that followed, the world rearranged itself. The ranch was called Broken Mesa, near the edge of McKenna County, west of the old railroad tracks that no longer ran. The cowboy was Will Harper, and the boy was his oldest, Tom. 2 more children emerged like fox kits, a red-headed girl named Elsie and a smaller one, Rosie, who didn't speak but followed Mara everywhere like a feral thing. No one asked her why she'd come, no one told her to go. She found herself sweeping out sheds, peeling potatoes, mending shirts. Mara knew how to vanish in usefulness. It had kept her alive during long spells when Warren didn't look at her unless there was a Dr. Bill or a dry chicken to blame. On the 5th morning, Will poured her coffee without speaking and sat across from her at the rough-cut table. "You looking to stay on?" "I'm not looking," she said, "just breathing." He studied her a while. "Breathing counts. You can earn your keep here if you want. Ain't much, but the kids like you." Mara thought of Rosie, who had taken to sitting beside her in the dusk while she shelled peas, her tiny hands mimicking the motion. Mara had never held a baby past its 4th month. The ache surprised her. She nodded once. "All right." So it was set. Work on Broken Mesa didn't leave room for mourning. Every day was fence mending, animal tending, roof patching. Will was not a man who wasted words or motion. When he wasn't working, he was watching the sky like it might betray him. Mara learned quick to match his silences. There were scars on his forearms, old rope burns and fresher cuts that hadn't healed right. She never asked how his wife died or why Rosie didn't speak. The pain was already written in the way he moved when someone mentioned winter. Tom told her in pieces anyway. Their mother had died birthing Rosie. The last midwife on the trail, gone 3 years since, left no replacements. Will buried her under the cottonwood where the cattle never grazed. He don't say her name, Tom said once. I think maybe it hurts too much. Mara said nothing. She knew something of that. By summer's turn, people in town started to talk. Will Harper, long widowed, had taken in a woman. No one knew her name proper, only that she cooked better than most and could skin a rabbit in under a minute, that she didn't go to church, that the children followed her like shadows. One woman called her a witch. Another said she must have worked at a saloon. Mara heard all of it. Will never said a word in town, but one night, while she scrubbed the mud off Rosie's boots by lamplight, he stepped into the room and said, quiet as prayer, "Don't let them make you feel small." She didn't answer, but she didn't cry either. The years had taken many things from Mara Caldwell. Her name, her place, her blood hope of a child, but here in the red dirt and the wind something was being rebuilt, slowly, quietly, one day at a time, and it had just begun. The monsoon came early that year. It rolled over the hills like something uninvited, ripping branches and flooding the creek bed that separated Broken Mesa from the next ranch over. The fields drowned. The hens stopped laying. The pigs bellowed like prophets. On the fourth day, a lightning bolt struck the hay shed and set it to burning. Will had it out before the roof gave, but the smoke blackened half his left arm, and the next morning the skin split open like parchment. Mara found him in the kitchen with a rag soaked in vinegar and his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. The kids were outside trying to build a dam of stones and laughter. Mara took one look and said, "You'll rot like a hog left out if you don't let me clean it proper." He didn't argue. That told her how bad it was. She sat him down, boiled water, and crushed the herbs she dried herself months back, things she remembered from her grandmother's old root cellar: comfrey, willow bark, a pinch of wintergreen. Her hands moved with purpose. His arm trembled once, but he didn't make a sound. "You were a healer?" he asked, not looking at her. "No," she said, "just a woman who's watched enough pain not to flinch." The skin peeled away in layers, and she kept her face steady. He didn't thank her when she wrapped it. He didn't have to. The storm passed by the 6th day, leaving the land gorged and muddy. Mara hung laundry while the wind dried it sharp, and the children ran barefoot through puddles. Rosie clung to her hem like she always did, wordless, eyes wide. Then, one afternoon, something shifted. They were sitting under the oak behind the house, stringing beads from a cracked tin of sewing supplies. Rosie tugged Mara's sleeve and whispered a sound, soft, nearly swallowed. "Mama." Mara froze. The little girl repeated it, this time with a kind of certainty, and set one small bead in Mara's hand like an offering. Her eyes, black as coal-wet ash, didn't blink. Mara held the bead so tightly she felt it dig into her palm. That night, after the children had gone to bed, she found Will on the porch with a jug of cheap whiskey and a gaze pinned to the horizon like he might outrun it. "She called me Mama today." He didn't answer at first, just tipped the bottle back and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You mind that?" "I don't know what I mind anymore," she said. The silence stretched, then broke. "She don't remember her real one," he said, voice flat. "Elsie does, Tom too, but Rosie was still sucking her thumb when it happened. I tell myself that's mercy." Mara sat down beside him. "It's not." "No," he agreed. They didn't talk more. The stars came out one by one, and the night grew thick around them. Mara thought about what it meant to be claimed, not as a wife or a possession, but as something primal, something needed. Rosie had named her without asking. A child's truth, simple, unfiltered. She didn't correct it. The next month brought dryness again, and with it, the return of men who'd heard about Will Harper's ranch and its slow recovery. Some rode in offering trade. Others came looking to buy. Broken Mesa had water access, and that meant leverage. Will refused them all. One, a man named Barrett, didn't take kindly to refusal. He came back 3 nights in a row, each time with a bigger crew, louder words, and meaner eyes. Mara watched from the kitchen window as Will squared his shoulders and stood on the porch with Tom at his side like a deputy too young for a badge. She watched Barrett spit on the ground and promise he'd return. Will didn't flinch. Mara didn't sleep that night. She sat in the dark with her back to the door and the shotgun across her knees. She remembered the way Warren's fists had sounded against the kitchen wall the night she told him the third baby had died inside her. She remembered blood on her hands and the way silence became armor. In the morning, she loaded bullets into every rifle they owned, just in case. Will didn't question it. By late autumn, it became clear that Barrett wasn't interested in purchase anymore. He wanted to break the ranch. He poisoned the north well, slaughtered a steer, left it rotting on the fence line. Will stayed steady, but Mara could see the wear in his shoulders, the way his hands shook when he thought no one watched. Elsie started sleeping with a knife under her pillow. Tom begged to be taught how to shoot better. Will relented. Mara did too. By the first frost, the house was a fortress. Reinforced doors, dugout cellars, traps set along the eastern ridge. Still, the fear was a slow tide that soaked them every night, soaking into the walls, into Rosie's nightmares, into the brittle way Will kissed his children's foreheads before dawn like it might be the last time. They were a family now, whether spoken or not, blood or not, and the world hated that. One Sunday afternoon a knock came, not at the front. At the back, near the chicken coop, soft as wind and just as wrong. Mara answered with a rifle in hand. It was Barrett. It was a woman. She looked younger than Mara, but life had cut deep around the mouth and eyes. Her dress was clean, too clean for someone traveling alone, and her hands trembled just enough to be noticed. "I'm looking for shelter," she said. "I heard there's kindness here." Mara looked past her, saw no tracks, but the woman carried nothing. No bag, no coat, just a necklace of pale bone around her neck. "What's your name?" Mara asked. The woman hesitated. "Sarah." Mara didn't believe her. Still, she let her in. That night Mara didn't sleep. Neither did Will. There was a scent about the woman, honeysuckle and iron, like perfume rubbed over rot. And in the morning, Rosie was gone. Rosie vanished like breath in winter. No tracks, no scream. Her boots were by the door where she'd left them. The quilt she slept under was folded with care, her little rag doll perched on top like she'd been told to leave it behind. Will's roar cracked the morning open. He tore through the house, then the barn, shouting her name until his voice gave out. Tom saddled 2 horses before the sun cleared the ridge. Elsie stood frozen in the doorway, one braid half undone, whispering prayers to a god who had never answered fast enough. Mara searched the creek beds first, then the old well. Then the cellar where they kept preserves and tools and where once, long ago, Mara had hidden from her first husband's rage. But Rosie wasn't there. She wasn't anywhere. And Sarah was gone too. By noon, they found the tracks. Just one horse heavyset moving east. A woman's weight, leading something light, maybe a child. The trail was shallow, but Mara read it the way others read scripture. She followed until the sky bled orange and the sagebrush tore open her calves. They camped that night beneath a bluff. Will didn't speak. He lit no fire. Tom kept the rifles close, eyes wild with something older than fear. Elsie curled against Mara and whispered, "Why she take her? What does she want?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't know, but her mind wandered back to the necklace of bone, the way Sarah's hands trembled like someone used to shackles. There was something in the woman's face that hadn't matched the name, something unlearned, something hungry. She wasn't looking for shelter, Mara said aloud, her voice like flint. She was looking for a child. At dawn, they rode. The trail led them into the dead lands. East of the basin, past the rusted cattle cars and the graveyard of locomotives, where the earth cracked from heat and vultures circled things still breathing. No one lived out there, not unless they were running from something worse. They rode past abandoned mines and shanty camps, past a trading post long since burned. Mara's knuckles split from gripping the reins. Will's eyes never left the trail. On the second day, they found the first sign of Rosie. A piece of her hair ribbon caught on a branch of devil's thorn. Elsie wept when she saw it. Will took it and tied it around the butt of his rifle. They didn't stop. On the third day, the wind turned foul. Campfires lit the hills in the distance, small ones, scattered, too many to count, and among them movement, shapes, people maybe, or not people anymore. Tom pointed at a rock ridge half a mile ahead. "There," he said, "that's smoke." Mara pulled her rifle tight to her chest. "We go quiet." They dismounted and walked the last stretch. At the crest, they saw it, an encampment built into a sunken hollow, ringed by shattered wagons and canvas sheets staked like tents. At the center, a bonfire blazed. Around it sat a ring of women, 20 or more, some old, some young, all dressed in threadbare clothes, faces streaked with soot or paint. And in the center, holding Rosie in her lap, was Sarah. The child was unharmed, pale, yes, silent, but breathing. She looked at Mara with calm eyes as if she'd expected them all along. Will nearly charged, but Mara caught his arm. "Wait," she hissed. "We don't know what this is yet." One of the women looked up. Her voice rang out sharp. "Who comes with weapons to a cradle?" Mara stepped forward. "Give the child back." "She came to us," Sarah said, her hand stroking Rosie's hair. "She's one of ours. We'll spat in the dirt. She's mine." Another woman laughed. Her teeth were filed to points. "She was yours, now she's safe. She won't die in blood like her mother. She won't carry your silence like a coffin." Mara looked at the fire, then at the faces around it. Not witches, not mad, survivors, cast-offs, the thrown away. She understood then this was no cult, no madness. It was a haven, a brutal one, sure, but built from the same hurt that had made Mara run barefoot through the desert once. "She didn't ask to be taken," Mara said. Sarah looked at her. And this time her voice broke. "No, but she called you Mama and you didn't stop her. That means you love her. That means you know." Mara's breath caught. Sarah stood, lifting Rosie gently. "She's yours if you'll fight for her." Will drew his rifle. "No," Mara said. She stepped forward, weaponless, "not with bullets." She looked into Sarah's eyes, then past her into the ring of women who watched, waiting for something older than justice. "I was discarded," Mara said, "because I couldn't make life, and I thought that was the end of my story, but Rosie, she wasn't born from me. She grew toward me." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "I'm not here to steal her back. I'm here to carry her forward." For a long moment, there was only the crackle of the fire. Then Sarah handed Rosie to her, slow and deliberate like passing a torch. "She dreams loud," she whispered. "You'll have to teach her how to sleep again." Mara cradled the child close, feeling the heartbeat against her own. They left the camp without speaking. Will held Elsie's hand too tightly. Tom walked ahead, shoulders rigid. That night, back at Broken Mesa, Rosie slept between Mara and the wall, her breath shallow, her small body twitching with nightmares Mara couldn't enter. Will sat at the kitchen table until dawn. He didn't ask what Mara had done to bring her back. He only said, "Thank you." She didn't answer. She just lit the stove and started making bread, because the dough would rise whether the world broke or not. And she had someone to feed. Winter came early, harder than before. The frost bit through the windows even after Mara sealed the sills with rags and tallow. The cattle grew listless, and the old mare slipped on ice, breaking her leg clean. Will put her down with one bullet and said nothing for the rest of the day. Rosie wouldn't sleep without Mara now. She'd wake in the dark, eyes wide, whispering things that made no sense about fires and women with smoke on their hands. She'd grab at Mara's hair, her shirt, her skin, as if anchoring herself to something solid in a world still not yet safe. The rest of the family learned to speak quieter. Tom stopped asking about Sarah's camp. Elsie no longer played near the tree line. Even Will, who had never asked questions of anyone, started to watch Mara differently. Like she'd crossed into something sacred and come back scarred. She had. Mara rose before dawn every day and worked until her knuckles bled. She carried Rosie on her hip sometimes as she fed the chickens or chopped wood until the girl started carrying herself again. And when she did, she walked with purpose. She no longer looked behind her. "I want a knife," Rosie said one morning. Mara didn't laugh. She went to the shed, found an old paring blade, dulled the edge, and gave it to her. The child wore it on a string around her neck like a promise. That same week, they found a coyote gutted on the porch. No sign of struggle, no blood trail, just the body, skinned clean, eyes missing, something meant to warn. Will stood over it with a look Mara hadn't seen before, fear laced with recognition. "It's Barrett," he said. "He's not gone." Mara crouched beside the carcass. This wasn't just anger, this was ritual. Will's silence confirmed what she suspected. Barrett was no longer just trying to drive them out. He was hunting them, slow, methodical, patient. Elsie wouldn't go to the outhouse without Tom guarding her. The chickens stopped laying again. And each night something moved through the trees, too heavy for deer, too slow for wolves. Mara started keeping a loaded shotgun beneath Rosie's bed. By the new year, it was clear Barrett was waiting for something. Not land, not livestock. Not water rights, something else. And then one night, Mara found the marker. She was gathering firewood near the creek bed when her boot hit something shallow. A wooden plank buried beneath a scatter of leaves. She dug it out hands numb and saw her name carved deep, Mara Caldwell, followed by a date not yet come. A grave. He'd made her a grave. She didn't scream. She didn't weep. She walked back to the house and laid the plank on the table in front of Will. His face went gray. "He's getting closer," she said. "This time he doesn't want what's ours. He wants who we are." Will stared at the plank a long time. Then he said, "Then we stop being prey." They prepared for war, not defense. Tom started setting snare traps. Mara mixed lye soap with ashes and rubbed it over the doors to mask their scent. Will moved the children's beds to the root cellar, lined the walls with feed sacks, and handed Mara a revolver. The kind a soldier might have carried once, heavy, honest. That night they heard the sound of horses, 4 riders, slow, deliberate. Will stood in the dark at the top of the hill with the scope from his old hunting rifle. He didn't shoot. He only watched as Barrett and his men circled the property and left a dead jackrabbit nailed to the barn door. A message. "They'll come on the new moon," Will said. Mara nodded. "Then we take the light from them first." The plan came together like muscle memory. They dug ditches behind the shed, filled lanterns with extra kerosene. Tom soaked strips of canvas in oil. Mara stitched salt and crushed glass into the seams of their coats. She braided Rosie's hair tight and gave her one rule: "If I say run, you run west. Don't look back." "I want to stay," Rosie whispered. "I want to help." "You help by surviving." The night of the new moon came cold and dry, the sky a vast nothing. No wind, no birdsong, only stillness. They waited in the dark, eyes wide, breath held. Rosie lay in the cellar with Elsie curled beside her, whispering lullabies that trembled like leaves. Mara stood in the doorway of the house, shotgun braced, heart steady. And then the first shot came, not at the house, at the barn, a fire arrow. Then another and another. The roof caught fast, dry wood drinking flame. Light flooded the yard, casting long shadows. Barrett's riders charged from the trees, hooting like devils. 4, maybe 5. Mara didn't wait. She fired once, then ducked as return fire shattered the window beside her. Tom took position behind the chicken coop and hit a rider clean through the chest. Will emerged from the smoke, rifle crack sharp, silent as sin. Barrett himself rode through the fire like it was his birthright, face painted black, eyes wild. He didn't shoot. He didn't speak. He dismounted with a slow grace and walked toward the house like he'd already won. Mara stepped out to meet him. "You came," he said, almost smiling. "You made me a grave," she answered. He nodded. "Because that's where you belong. You don't get to keep what ain't yours." "She's mine," Mara said. "She's ours. You don't get to take anything again." Barrett stepped forward, and Mara pulled the trigger. The blast caught him in the ribs, tore him sideways. He fell, groaned, reached for his pistol. She stepped closer and fired again. When he didn't move, she waited. Only after the smoke cleared did she lower the gun. The others scattered. One limped off with a shattered leg. Another lay dead by the barn. The fire had consumed half the roof, but the house still stood. Will checked each body, then checked Mara. She stood with the shotgun still raised. "Is he gone?" Rosie called from the cellar. Mara's voice didn't shake. "Yes," she said, "he's gone." She didn't sleep that night. Just sat beside the grave Barrett had dug for her, carving new letters into the plank. Not her name anymore. Mother. Protector. She left it at the edge of the property, so others would know this place was not for taking. Not anymore. Spring didn't come with flowers that year. It came with mud, with wind that bent trees sideways, and a silence so deep the birds forgot how to return. The barn stood black and half-collapsed, its carcass smoking for weeks. Will said they'd rebuild. Mara didn't answer. She spent her mornings walking the edge of the property, shotgun in one hand, Rosie's hand in the other. The girl was quieter now, not from fear, but something deeper, awareness. She'd seen death and chosen to stay standing. Children didn't speak of such things. They just carried them like stones in their pockets. One morning, Mara found her burying small objects in the orchard, beads, sticks, bones. She didn't ask why. She only knelt and helped dig. Tom built a new chicken coop with a roof low to the ground, hard to climb, harder to burn. Elsie took to carving names into tree trunks. She started with her mother, then her own, then Mara's. Letters crooked but deep. Will dug graves for every man who died in their yard, even Barrett. No stones, just bare dirt and a strip of sage across each one. He didn't ask for help. Mara gave it anyway. "Are we safe now?" Elsie asked one night, curled up by the stove while Mara stitched a tear in her brother's coat. Mara looked into the flame. "We're something better than safe," she said. "We're seen." In town, whispers twisted like wind through narrow streets. Some said Will Harper had gone mad, that he'd let a woman run his ranch and gun down a man like a bounty killer. Others said she'd come from witch stock, that her hands knew how to heal and how to hurt with the same tenderness. No one said it to her face. When she rode into town for supplies, people stepped aside. Some nodded, some looked away. The grocer's boy offered her a handful of mint and said, "For the little one." She took it without smiling, but she left a silver coin behind. She had no use for charity. On the way back that day, she stopped at the bluff where Rosie had been taken. The ground was bare now, no sign of the camp, but Mara could still feel it in the air, sorrow laid like a foundation. That place hadn't been evil. Just full of women like her, shaped into strange forms by too many hard seasons. It haunted her not with fear, but with kinship. She knelt and pressed her hand into the dirt, eyes closed. "I understand," she whispered. When she returned home, Rosie was waiting with something clenched in her fist. A drawing crude, childlike of their family, Will with his hat, Mara with her braid, Elsie holding a chicken, Tom aiming a rifle. And in the middle, Rosie with a knife on her belt and a flower in her hair. You drew us, Mara said. Rosie nodded. We don't leave now, right? No, Mara said. We stay. That night a letter came. No rider brought it. Just a scrap of parchment nailed to the door. It read, there are others coming, ones who don't want land, ones who want what you've made. It wasn't signed. Will stared at it a long time. You think it's Sarah. Mara shook her head. Sarah gave Rosie back. This is someone else. He folded the letter and tucked it into his shirt. We'll be ready. But readiness had a cost. That week Tom found a trap broken, the spring bent, something big, strong, maybe a man, maybe not. And then a sound came one night, low, wrong, like iron dragged across stone. The livestock cried out. The children woke screaming. Will fired twice into the trees. Nothing answered. Mara took Rosie and ran her fingers through the child's hair until she slept again. There's no end to it, is there? Will asked, not as a question. No, she answered. There's only holding what we've got. The next day, she found claw marks on the cellar door. 5 of them, long, deep. Rosie saw them too. She said nothing, but she slept with the paring knife in her hand from then on. The air grew colder again, strange for spring. Wind came down from the hills and brought with it a smell of ash and meat. Mara set traps with steel teeth. Will taught Elsie how to strike a match and run. Tom practiced blind-loading a rifle. And Rosie began drawing shapes in the dirt again. Circles, symbols, things Mara didn't recognize. One evening she asked, "Where did you learn that?" Rosie didn't look up. From the fire women, in dreams. Mara didn't stop her. She watched. They came 3 nights later. Not men, not beasts, things between. Pale shapes with teeth like rusted nails, cloaked in the smell of burned sage and blood. Will saw the first of them just after midnight, standing at the tree line, watching. He didn't wait, he fired. The shape dissolved like dust in wind. Mara gathered the children into the cellar, locked the door from outside, whispered to Rosie, "You don't open this unless it's my voice you hear." Then she turned and faced the yard. 6 of them emerged, no eyes, only mouths. They moved wrong like shadows in water. Mara didn't hesitate. She lit the traps. Fire exploded across the ground in rings, driving 3 of the creatures back. Tom took one down with a headshot. Will swung the axe into another and shouted Mara's name. The last one came fast, too fast. It reached her before she could reload. Claws slashed her arm. She fell hard, blood soaked her shirt. It leaned over her, and then a voice rose, high, furious. "Get away from my mama." Rosie, the cellar door burst open. The child stood with her arms raised, knife in one hand, the other smeared with something red and shining. Around her, the symbols she'd drawn in the dirt began to glow. The creature turned, and then it screamed. Light exploded from the ground. The shape disintegrated. Silence fell. Rosie ran to Mara and pressed her tiny hands to the wound. "You're not allowed to go," she said. Mara smiled through pain. "I won't." "Not now, not ever." Will carried her inside. Tom stood guard all night, fire at his feet, rifle in hand. The sun rose late, but it rose, and nothing came after. By summer, the soil softened again. Tom planted new crops in the back fields, beans and barley, and things that could survive on little mercy. Mara watched from the porch, her arm still bandaged, the scar under it pink and jagged like a second mouth. It had taken weeks to close. Weeks of fever dreams and Rosie pressing cool cloths to her forehead, whispering, "Stay, Mama, just stay." She stayed. Will repaired the barn slower this time, one plank at a time, like building something meant to last past them. He said little, but his eyes lingered longer on the horizon these days, and he never let his rifle stray far from reach. Rosie slept easy now. She no longer cried out. She no longer dreamed of fire women. Instead, she began learning the ranch like she'd been born to it, how to read weather, how to break a horse with sugar cubes and patience, how to keep bees from swarming by singing soft under her breath. Mara taught her all she knew, and then watched as the girl taught herself more. The knife Rosie had once worn on a string now hung from her belt in a real sheath. "Can I help with the branding this year?" she asked one morning. Mara looked at Will. He nodded. Rosie grinned. Elsie carved new names into the trees that spring. She added one more next to the others, Rosie Harper, below it, daughter of fire and bone. Nobody corrected her. On Sundays, Mara began teaching the children how to read properly. Not just Bible verses or dry homestead manuals, but poetry. Things she remembered from a past life, lines about mountains and wolves, and a world that could still be beautiful if you looked from the right angle. One morning, as she read a stanza aloud, Will stood just outside the window listening, hands on his hips, dirt under his nails. He didn't speak, but when she paused, she heard him repeat the last line under his breath like a blessing. "And still I rise." The townsfolk changed too, slowly. The grocer's wife came by with fresh peaches. The blacksmith offered to repair their plow for free. The preacher stopped asking when Mara and Will would make their union proper in the eyes of God. It was Elsie who finally asked aloud, "Are you going to marry her?" Will looked at Mara across the table. She raised an eyebrow. "That your idea or theirs?" she asked the girl. Elsie shrugged. "Mine. I just think it would make a nice story." Will leaned back in his chair. "We already got the story," he said. "Paper and prayer don't make it stronger." Tom nodded. Rosie climbed into Mara's lap. That was answer enough. But that summer didn't pass without omen. A rider came one day near dusk, limping along the ridge, not from town, not from any of the ranches nearby. He wore Union blue, though the war had been over decades, and his boots were polished to a shine too perfect for travel. He didn't ask for water or food. He only said, "She's being watched." Will stepped forward, eyes narrow. "Who?" The rider pointed a finger at Mara. "Her, the one who claimed what was lost." Mara didn't flinch. "By who?" The rider smiled. "By the ones who came before, the ones who remember what was taken." He tipped his hat and turned his horse without another word. Mara stood in the yard long after he vanished from sight. Will came beside her. "We can leave," he said. "If you want, start somewhere new." She shook her head. "No, we end here." And so they stayed, but they watched the sky more carefully. They taught the children how to walk without leaving tracks, how to whisper passwords before coming through the door, how to burn a name to ash without speaking it twice. By autumn, the orchard bore fruit again, apples this time, tart, hard, the kind that bruised easy but still kept their shape in pies. Mara baked one for Rosie's birthday. The whole family gathered around the table, candlelight flickering. Tom handed her a slingshot. Elsie gave her a book of stories she'd written herself. Will passed her a hand-carved wooden locket with a wolf etched on the front. And Mara gave her a simple iron ring. "This belonged to no one," she said. "Now it belongs to you." Rosie slid it onto her finger and smiled. "I'm going to keep us safe." "You already did," Mara said. That night after the fire went low and the stars blinked like watching eyes, Mara lay beside Will and listened to the wind shift. It carried no threat, not tonight, just the long breath of a land that had learned to wait. She traced the scar on her arm, remembered the women in the hollow, remembered Sarah's voice, remembered every loss that had shaped her. She had been thrown away, broken open, left for rot. But this place, these children, this man, they hadn't healed her. They'd let her build something from the pieces, and in the end, that was stronger than healing. That was a name no grave could hold. She closed her eyes and slept without fear.